Today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful charcuterie board. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the shop, everybody. Well, I am working on my last custom project. It's December 21st, so I'm right down to the wire here. Uh, I'm making a wine bottle shaped charcuterie board for a client. It's going to look a lot like this. It's going to have their monogram on there, which is a really nice touch. The resins that we chose kind of emulate a red wine bottle. It's very shimmery and very nice looking. So I'm going to walk you through every step and how to make this. It requires a couple of things. You're going to need a mold. Obviously, I have my laser engraver. You don't have to engrave it, but these have been good sellers at like art fairs at wineries. They haven't been great sellers on Etsy. It's one of those things I think you need to see it. I have another one that emulates a white wine bottle. So that's pretty cool too. This one's not done, obviously. It hasn't been finished and sanded and laser engraved, but it gives you an idea. So let's get to it. I'll show you every step. So you do need a mold for this project, and I bought this from Crafted Elements out of Canada. They make good molds and their service is exceptional. What I do first is when I get a new mold, I make a template, and the way I do that is by mixing resin and pouring it inside here and letting it cure, and then now I have a reusable template that I will use to make the cork end. So this simulates the cork here. So what I do is I take a scrap piece of wood and I simply mark out what I'm looking for, like so. And then what I do is I go over to the bandsaw, or you could do this with your jigsaw too. But over my bandsaw, I just cut this out, and then I'll sand it to make sure that it fits properly in the mold. So let me show you. I've already done this off camera. But again, very simple. So that cork end just fits in just like so. And I already pre-cut a piece of walnut. That's going to be the label. And that's going to go right in here. So now all I have to do is remove the wood, spray my mold with mold release, set all this back up, and mix up some resin. So let's do that next. The next step in this process is to figure out how much resin we need. And so what I did, the mold is 5 inches wide, and I'm going to have a total of, that's 3.5, and we're going to just kind of guesstimate on this, about 6, 5 3/4. So I've got 9 1/4 inches by 5 inches. And so I use an epoxy calculator, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, so this is from Moss Epoxies, and I'll put a link in the comments. But there I've entered 9 1/4 inches by 5 inches, and this is going to be about 7/8 of an inch thick. It's going to be a little bit thicker pour than what I really need. I'm going to have a little extra, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with that extra. So when we scroll down, it tells me that I need 22 ounces of resin. So that's what we're going to mix up next. Well, some of you may want to know what resin I'm using today. This is called Beast Bond, and it mixes at a 1-to-1 ratio. I like this for smaller projects. It tends to cure pretty quickly. It can pose a problem if you have wood such as olive wood, for instance, that has a lot of nooks and crannies. You might get more bubbles, and you might not be able to get all those bubbles out. But with that walnut we're doing, it's going to be just fine. So there you go, Beast Bond. All right, I've poured part A and B into this graduated cup. It's got ounces here, so I'm all set up. You look inside it, it's kind of cloudy, kind of weird looking because it does have the two different resins, the hardener and the epoxy. So to mix it, you could go old school. It's going to take some time, but I prefer to use these little paddles attached to my drill. And the trick is to do it gently enough so you're not introducing a ton of bubbles. So off camera, I'm going to mix this up, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to mix in the pigment. Well, the resin is nice and clear. And I'm going to go ahead and put in some pigment. Now, with this particular project, I'm using more pigment than I would, say, with something that I want to keep a live edge somewhat visible. Isn't that pretty? Okay. I'm going to use that same mixer to mix it up. Isn't that pretty? So it's got purples and some black in there. I think there's even a little bit of gold flake or something, something that's definitely metallic, but it's very pretty. And when it sits in the mold, it tends to go through this exothermic effect. You get a bloom, and you'll see what happens next. There's even a little bit of green in there. Amazing color. Okay, we're going to go pour this in the resin room and keep moving forward. Now for the fun part, we get to pour some resin. Before we do that, though, if I pour resin, this wood's going to float. So I need to put a block down. This one I don't think I'm going to have to because it's very snug in the mold. So let's go ahead and do our pour. Make sure my wood is where it's supposed to be. Looks good. Now, once this is poured, then I'll go back in and with a torch pop any bubbles that pop up. Looking good. We'll come back to you in just a minute. Well, I did have to put this weight on, and I've got a couple of really tiny bubbles. I'm going to take care of those right now. With a torch, you want to move very quickly. Really does a nice job. So I'm going to come back, maybe in another 5 minutes or so, check on bubbles. I know I'll have a few more. And you see the pattern that's happening right now? Well, it's going to continue to change. So I'm going to come through and take a few pictures along the way just so you see how it changes. Now, I had mentioned about having some extra resin. Well, unfortunately, I didn't. But when I do have extra resin, I have some of these silicone molds like this. It's a pyramid shape or a sphere. And I just use the extra resin, I pour it in there, and they end up being little gifts for my customers. So just kind of a fun, cool thing to do. Okay, we'll see you in a few. Well, it's been 4 hours since I poured the resin. The bloom or exothermic reaction is done. So it moved along very quickly. It looks really good. So I'm happy about that. With this type of resin, I can demold this tomorrow, but I need to wait a few more days before I can actually work with it. So we're going to come back and demold it and talk about what we're going to do next.
Okay, because of the holiday, this is cured for about a week. It's ready to come out of the mold, and that's what we're going to do right now. This is an easy one to demold. There's not any nooks and crannies. There we go. Okay. That's going to be absolutely gorgeous. Now, the next step is I'm going to determine what's the flattest side. I see this is a little bit cupped, and that's from the weights, I believe, from the weighing down the wood. So we're going to determine the flat side, run this through the drum sander, get it nice and perfectly flat, and we're going to do a routed edge around over and do some nice sanding, and then we'll engrave that monogram right here. Cool.
Well, as you can hear, the audio is funky. My apologies. I upgraded my iPhone and I'm having microphone problems.
Mission accomplished. The board is flat now, and it's ugly. That's what happens. You can't get discouraged over that. Take something that looks kind of pretty, and we make it ugly, and then we make it beautiful. So it's just part of the steps. So time to do a round over on my router table. If you don't have a router table, just use your router. If you don't have a router, well, you can do that with your oscillating sanders. So don't sweat it. All right, let's get her done.
Well, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it.
Okay, it's back to being really quite pretty, but a couple more steps. We need to water pop this first. And for those of you newer woodworkers, water popping is simply spraying some water on the wood, and that raises the grain. We let that dry, and then we come back with the last grit, which in this case was 400 grit for the wood. I went to 1500 grit on the resin. So let's take a look. This is our first real peek at what it's going to look like once the finish is applied. Check it out. Look at that. I hope you can see it like I can. It's just fabulous. So, we're going to come back in a few minutes. We'll do a quick sand, and we're going to talk about laser engraving. My final sand after the water popping, and I've got everything set up in my laser. I just wanted to show you the software that I'm using. This is from Xtool, and this monogram I picked up from Etsy. There's a number of places where you can find beautiful artwork that's all ready to go for either engraving or cutting. You can find them at Etsy. There's another outfit called Sofontsy. So those are just a couple of suggestions for you. So in this case, I'm already set up. We're going to reposition the camera, and I'll give you a little bit of a time lapse on the engraving. But I'm loving my Xtool, and in fact, just so you know, in the very near future, I'm going to be working with another laser company to do a review. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's burn some wood. The laser engraving is all done, and now it's time for the finish. And I'm using my board butter. Works fantastic for this application. So when I apply this, the colors will pop. The lighting isn't very good, but you'll see in the next segment how this looks. But I apply the board butter not only over the wood, but on the resin too. The excess will be wiped off in just a little bit. This stuff works fantastic for any of your wood pieces, your cutting boards, for instance. I use it on the crosses that I make. Okay. I've got it applied thoroughly, and that looks really nice. So we're going to give that a few minutes. We'll be back to wipe it off and wrap this project up. This has been a fun project. I know the client's going to be really happy with this. You know, and this is such a simple thing to do. This is definitely a great beginner project for resin workers. Now, I haven't shown you what happens when you can see through it. Isn't that a trip? Really cool. Most people won't see it that way. Most of the time it'll be on a surface like this. But anyway. Well, I am super happy with how this turned out. It's a really easy project for first-time resin workers. The laser engraving is a really cool touch. The colors are neat. It's elegant. I know my customer's going to be very happy with this. So, hey, thank you for following along. I really appreciate it. If you would, hit subscribe, hit that bell so you get all the notifications. Check out in the comments. I've got some great affiliate links. They don't cost you anything. I make a little bit. I mean, we're talking a little bit. But it does help to bring content like this to you. So much appreciated, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.